Actually, no. I'm going to see if I can visit during the Vasa.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to be reading from, I don't see anybody in the chat yet.
It's too early. It takes a few minutes for people to roll in.
So I'm going to, one says Buddhist Insights and one says Empty Cloud. So how do I just put, and then it says Facebook also. So I'm going to put the where you can find this. If you go to Sutta Central, you'll have to compress all the characters, but I'm going to put, if you have a hard copy, it's in the middle length discourses, and it's number 75, and it's a teaching to Magandia. And if you go to Sutta Central, do lowercase and just put all the characters in one. It's one word. Oops, I keep trying to touch screen. Okay, so this is a teaching to Magandia, who's a wanderer. And you can find actually the Bhante Bodhis. I'm going to read Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. I like it because it's a little more dramatic. he uses a little more dramatic terminology, and sometimes I think we need that to impress on the mind, this teaching. So there's a few people. One person starting to, I can't pronounce your name, I'm sorry. It's Nguyen or something, Nguyen. I'm sorry, I'll try. If I don't know how to pronounce it, maybe I shouldn't try. Okay, so this is a teaching to Magandia, and I'm just going to summarize the very beginning of it because there's a lot of repetition and I want to get to the heart of the sutta. But the Lord Buddha is staying in this Brahman's fire chamber, and the Brahman has put out a straw mat or a spread of straw for him. And this is interesting because at this point, for some reason, the Buddha is wandering alone. He's not with a large group of monastics, monastic sangha, which he's often accompanied by. But in this one, he's just staying in the Brahman's chamber, and he's in a town called Kama Sadama, and that's with the Kurus in the Kuru country. And he goes out to wander for alms, and then goes for his days abiding in a grove. And at the same time that he's out, the Lord Buddha's out, then the wanderer Magandia, while walking and wandering for exercise, went to the fire chamber of the Brahman belonging to the Bharadwaja clan. Excuse me. There he saw a spread of grass prepared and asked the Brahman, "For whom has the spread of grass been prepared in the Master Bharadwaja's fire chamber? It seems like it might be a recluse's bed." "Master Magandia, there is the recluse Gotama, the son of the Shakyans, who went forth from the Shakyan clan. Now a good report of Master Gotama has spread to this effect, that Blessed One is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of the worlds, incomparable, leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. This bed has been prepared for that Master Gotama." So this is a stock kind of recitation that people say it's actually this still recited today, the qualities of the Lord Buddha. And this will appear in many suttas when they're talking about his qualities. So now this is Master Magandia's response. Indeed, Master Bharadwaja It is an ill sight we see when we see the bed of that destroyer of growth, Master Gautama. So this is unpleasant waiting at the mind door when he's cognized that this is the bed of a recluse, the Lord Buddha. He has this, in his mind, he has a different opinion than the previous one. So he's just the Buddha. Be careful what you say, Magandia. Be careful what you say. Many learned nobles, learned Brahmins, learned householders, and learned recluses have full confidence in Master Gautama and have been disciplined by him in the noble true way, in the Dhamma that is wholesome. And then Magandia responds, Master Bharadwaja, even if we saw that Master Gautama face to face, we would tell him to his face, the recluse Gautama is a destroyer of growth. Why is that? Because that has come down in our discourse. So somehow in his tradition, what the Lord Buddha is teaching is seen as a destroyer of growth. And I looked up the word. It's also the bed being an ill sight. That's dudita as a bad sight, but bunapu is the word, and it's also translated as destroyer of beings, and bu has to do with being. It's a verb, but it's also becomes a noun with a bhuta. Bhuta is being. So I think Bhante Sujato has a slightly different translation. Destroyer of life, destroyer of growth, destroyer of beings, or being. So he would tell the Lord Buddha to himself, to his face, I mean. Then the Brahmin says, if Master Magandia has no objection, may I tell this to Master Gautama? Let Master Bharadwaja be at ease. Tell him just what I have said. Meanwhile, with the divine ear, which is purified and surpasses the human, the Blessed One heard this conversation between the Brahmin of the Bharadwaja clan and the wanderer Magandia. Then, when it was evening, the Blessed One rose from his meditation, went to the Brahmin's fire chamber, and sat down on the spread of grass made ready. Then the Brahmin of the Bharadwaja clan went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings, and so on. And then the Blessed One asks, Bharadwaja, did you have any conversation with the wanderer Magandia about this very same spread of grass? When this was said, the Brahmin, awestruck and with his hair standing on end, replied, we wanted to tell Master Gautama about that very thing, but Master Gautama has anticipated us. So this is kind of unusual that the Lord Buddha would actually kind of reveal that he had this kind of ability, but he may have some trust in this Brahmin. But also, sometimes it's used skillfully to make impressions on people. So, but this discussion between the Blessed One and the Brahmin of the Bharadwaja clan was left unfinished. For then the wanderer Magandia, while walking and wandering for exercise, came to the Brahmin's fire chamber and went up to the Blessed One, exchanged greetings with the Blessed One, and when this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side. The Blessed One said to him, now this is another shock I think. Magandhya, the eye delights in forms, takes delight in forms, rejoices in forms. The sights, forms are another word for sights. That has been tamed by the Tathagata, guarded, protected, and restrained. And he teaches the Dhamma for its restraint. Was it with reference to this that you said the recluse Gotama is a destroyer of growth? It was with reference to this, Master Gotama, that I said the recluse Gotama is a destroyer of growth. Why is that? Because it is recorded in our scriptures. So it may be because Magandhya is said to be hedonistic. And this is there's a certain, it was like almost a religious practice to indulge in sense pleasures and to find just new experiences at the sense gates and to gratify the sense gates. So anybody that's teaching restraint of the senses would be seen as a destroyer of being or life or growth. I couldn't find in the notes a really good understanding of what this was trying to say, but it is said that he was from a hedonistic clan. So the ear delights in sounds, the nose delights in odors, the tongue delights in flavors, the body delights in tangibles, the mind delights in mind objects, takes delight in mind objects, rejoices in mind objects. That has been tamed by the Tathagata, guarded, protected, and restrained. And he teaches the Dhamma for its restraint. Was it with reference to this that you said the recluse Gotama is a destroyer of growth? So we're talking about restraint at the sense gates, but you notice there's these words taming and guarding. So this is a guarding and protecting the mind, actually, from being overwhelmed by these, because we're driven by desire. This is driven by seeking more and more and more. And if you don't understand the problem with that, you'll just keep trying to satisfy the senses. That seems to be the way of the world, actually. It was with reference to this, Master Gotama, that I said the recluse Gotama is a destroyer of growth. Why is that? Because that is recorded in our scriptures. So he's just kind of being dogmatic about it rather than, really considering what's being said. So now the Lord Buddha says, what do you think, Magandhya? Here someone may have formerly enjoyed himself or herself themselves with forms cognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, likable, connected with sensual desire, provocative of lust. On a later occasion, having understood as they actually are, the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of forms, that's sights, he might abandon craving for forms, remove fever for forms, abide without thirst, with a mind inwardly at peace. What would you say to him, Magandhya? Nothing, Master Gotama. What do you think, Magandhya? Here someone may have formerly enjoyed himself or herself themselves with sounds cognizable by the ear, odors cognizable by the nose, flavors cognizable by the tongue, tangibles cognizable by the body, that are wished for desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust. On a later occasion, having understood as they actually are the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of tangibles, he might abandon craving for tangibles, remove the fever for tangibles, abide without thirst, with a mind inwardly at peace. What would you say to him, Magandia? Nothing, Master Gautama. So a few people have come in while I was reading. Welcome, everyone. So here appears the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. And this teaching appears in a number of suttas, either as a unit or there's either the 5 or 3, the gratification, danger, and the escape. And has to do with there's one sutta that says if there were no gratification in the senses, then beings would not be enamored by these senses. But since there's gratification, beings are enamored. And if there was no danger, people wouldn't find an escape from that danger. And if there was no escape, then it wouldn't be possible to end the suffering, the dukkha. So that's a very brief summary. Gratification, adinawa. No, that's the danger. Asada, that's enjoyment, gratification, enjoyment, relishing. This is different ways it's translated. And I think Bhante Sujato says love, but I don't know if that's... and then the adinawa is bad consequences, disadvantage, and that's, I think, Bhante Sujato says disadvantage, and danger. And I like the word danger because it's the stronger. And the danger is that it's impermanent, and then we keep trying to seek it. And so this is what's the actual danger is what keeps us in samsara. I've taken it a little bit further. Usually they just talk about the fact that it's impermanent is the danger. But the fact that it's impermanent keeps us seeking more and more and more. Keeps us... and then the suffering ensues because we keep endlessly trying to find this gratification. So, and the escape is the ending of that very craving. So, he'll get into this more as we go along, but this is kind of the summary ahead of time. So you'll see this as he's talking to Magandia through this teaching. So he says, Magandia, formerly, when I lived the home life, I enjoyed myself, provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. And then I'll skip over. I had, anyway, he repeats about the sight, sound, smells, touch, etc. He had 3 palaces, one for the rainy season, one for the winter, and one for the summer. I lived in the rain's palace for the 4 months of the rainy season, enjoying myself with musicians, not of whom were men, and I did not go down to the lower palace. So he's like, I don't know, it's supposed to be, I guess, more pleasurable to have female musicians. So he was entertained, and he had sense pleasures. On a later occasion, having understood as they actually are the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of sensual pleasures, I abandoned craving for sensual pleasures. I removed the fever for sensual pleasures, and I abide without thirst, with a mind inwardly at peace. I see no other beings who are not freed from lust for sensual. I see other beings who are free, not free from lust for sensual pleasures, being devoured by craving for sensual pleasures, burning with fever for sensual pleasures, indulging in sensual pleasures. And I do not envy them, nor do I delight therein. Why is that? Because there is, Magandia, a delight apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, which surpasses even divine bliss. Since I take delight in that, I do not envy what is inferior, nor do I delight therein. So, suppose Magandia, a householder or householder's son, was rich with great wealth and property, and was provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. He might enjoy himself with all the senses, so on, with cognizable by the all the senses that are wished for, desired, agreeable, likable, connected with sensual desire, provocative of lust, having conducted himself well in body, speech, and mind, on the dissolution of the body after death, he might reappear in a happy destination in the heavenly world with a retinue of gods of the 33, and there, surrounded by a group of nymphs in the Nandana grove, he would enjoy himself with the 5 chords of divine sensual pleasures. Suppose he saw a householder or householder's son enjoying himself, provided and endowed with the 5 chords of human sensual pleasure. What do you think, Magandia? Would that young god, surrounded by a group of nymphs and so on, would they envy the person that was enjoying human sensual pleasure, or be enticed by human sensual pleasures? And Magandia says, no, Master Gotama. Why not? Because divine sensual pleasures are more excellent and sublime than human sensual pleasures. So I think Magandia is getting a little hopeful here. But the Lord Buddha is doing a different kind of comparison. So too, Magandia, formerly when I lived in a home life and I enjoyed myself, provided and endowed with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, and with the forms and all the different sense gates being gratified, that are wished for, desired, agreeable, connected with sensual desire and provocative of lust, and on later occasion having understood as they actually are the gratification, the danger, and the escape. In the case of sense pleasures, I abandoned craving for sensual pleasures. I remove fever for sensual pleasure. I abide without thirst. And thirst is one translation of tanha. And I didn't cross-check this, but tanha is craving. And a literal translation is thirst. But when you're thirsty, you're just really driven to get something to drink. It's a very uncomfortable feeling if you're seriously thirsty. You really need to get something to drink. So he's abandoned thirst for the sense pleasures. So I lost my place. So he doesn't envy them nor delight in them. Why is that? Because there is Magandhya, a delight apart from sensual pleasure, apart from unwholesome states, which surpasses even divine bliss. Since I take delight in that, I do not envy what is inferior, nor do I delight therein. What are we doing on time? Okay. So this gets very graphic here, so hold on to your whatever you want to hold on to. Or maybe let it go. All right, we'll take a breath. I think Bhante J knows what's coming next. Okay. Suppose Magandhya there were a leper with sores and blisters on his limbs, being devoured by worms, scratching the scabs off the openings of his wounds with his nails, cauterizing his body over a burning charcoal pit. Then his friends and companions and kinsmen and relatives would bring a physician to treat him. The physician would make a medicine for him, and by means of that medicine, the man would be cured of his leprosy and would become well and happy, independent, master of himself, able to go where he likes. Then he might see another leper with sores and blisters on his limbs being devoured by worms, scratching the scabs off the openings of his wounds with his nails, cauterizing his body over a burning charcoal pit. What do you think, Magandhya? Would that man envy that leper for his burning charcoal pit or use of his medicine? No, Master Gotama. Why is that? Because when there is a sickness, there is a need for medicine. And when there is no sickness, there is no need for medicine. So to Magandhya, formerly when I lived in the home life, and since I do, and then there's ellipsis here. So he no longer wishes for he's comparing that to the charcoal pit. Since I delight in something superior to that, I do not envy what is inferior, nor do I delight therein. It's actually quite a large ellipsis here. But you might remember he was talking about delighting in states that are in that's even beyond divine bliss. So suppose there were a leper with sores and blisters on his limbs being devoured by worms and so on, cauterizing his body over a burning charcoal pit. Then his friends and companions and kinsmen and relatives brought a physician to treat him. The physician would make medicine for him, and by means of that medicine, the man would be cured of his leprosy and would become well and happy and independent, a master of himself, able to go where he likes. Then two strong men would seize him by both arms and drag him towards a burning charcoal pit. What do you think, Magandhya? Would that man twist his body this way and that? Yes, Master Gotama. Why is that? Because that fire is indeed painful to touch, hot and scorching. What do you think, Magandhya? Is it only now that fire is painful to touch, hot and scorching, or previously, too, was that fire painful to touch, hot and scorching? Master Gotama, that fire is now painful to touch, hot and scorching, and previously, too, that fire was painful to touch, hot and scorching. For when the man was a leper, with sores and blisters on his limbs, being devoured by worms, and so on, his faculties were impaired thus. Though the fire was actually painful to touch, he acquired a mistaken perception of it as pleasant. So this is interesting that Gandhi could really even cognize that. So too, Magandia, in the past, sensual pleasures were painful to touch, hot and scorching. In the future, sensual pleasures will be painful to touch, hot and scorching. And now, at present, sensual pleasures are painful to touch, hot and scorching. But these beings who are not free from lust for sensual pleasures, who are not devoured by craving for sensual pleasures, who burn with fever for sensual pleasures, have faculties that are impaired. Thus, though sensual pleasures are actually painful to touch, they acquire a mistaken perception of them as pleasant. So this is quite challenging, isn't it? And it may be until you experience something that's beyond sense pleasures that you actually can see that. Suppose, Magandia, there was a leper with sores and blisters, all ellipses. Okay, so he's cauterizing his body over burning charcoal pit. The more he scratches the scabs and cauterizes his body, the fouler and more evil smelling and more infected the openings of his wounds would become. Yet he would find a certain measure of satisfaction and enjoyment in scratching the openings of his wounds. So too, Magandia, beings who are not free from lust for sensual pleasures, who are not devoured by craving for sensual pleasures, who burn for fever for sensual pleasures, still indulge in sensual pleasures. The more such beings indulge in sensual pleasures, the more their craving for sensual pleasures increases, and the more they are burned by their fever for sensual pleasures. Yet they find a certain measure of satisfaction and enjoyment in dependence on the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. So, how are we doing on time? It seems. So he's going through a number of metaphors here with Magandia. We might divide this one in. Would this be a cliffhanger if we stop and go to on to the next, or we could go through it all. I mean, I could read it to the end, but there wouldn't be much time for discussion. How's everyone doing with this so far? It's extremely powerful sutta, and it's a challenging sutta. And he's doing this really to challenge this particular individual, because I think, in the beginning, the Lord Buddha said, with the divine eye, he was able to perceive Magandia coming to the fire chamber, and he knew the mind of this individual. So he could see that they could give him this powerful teaching. It was appropriate. He wouldn't just do this to blow somebody out of the water. He might say something really brief to somebody who is challenging him, and the person will walk off in disgust. But this is a very detailed teaching that he's giving. So, so we have about 20 minutes. So should I just keep going with it and get to? Yeah, we could go through. I can see from those here, we could just get through it, because there is hope. It's not all despair. And he is indicating there is something beyond these senses. That's dependent on these senses. And there's a lot of detail, too, to be learned about the sense gates and moderation and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to skip over to, because this is repetition. I say, good Magandia. I too have never seen or heard a king or a king's minister enjoying himself provided and endowed with the five chords of sensual pleasures, who without abandoning craving for such pleasures, without removing fever for such pleasures, was able to be free from thirst with a mind inwardly at peace, or who is able, or who will be able to abide. So someone who is indulging in sense pleasures and hasn't abandoned the craving isn't able to abide free from thirst with a mind inwardly at peace. So no one has seen that. On the contrary, Magandia, those recluses or Brahmins who abided or abide or will abide free from thirst with a mind inwardly at peace, all do so after having understood as they actually are the origin, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of sensual pleasures. And after abandoning craving for sensual pleasures and removing fever for sensual pleasures, that they abide or will abide free from thirst with a mind inwardly at peace. So this craving and fever, this obsession, this is a big culprit here. Then at this point, the Blessed One uttered this exclamation: the greatest of all gains is health. Nibbana is the greatest bliss. The Eightfold Path is the best of paths, for it leads safely to the deathless. When it was said, the wanderer Magandia said to the Blessed One, "It is wonderful, Master Gotama. It is marvelous how well that has been expressed by the Master Gotama. The greatest of all gains is health. Nibbana is the greatest bliss." We too have heard earlier wanderers who were teachers and teachers of teachers saying this. And it agrees, Master Gotama. But Magandia, when you heard earlier wanderers who were teachers and teachers of teachers saying this, what is that health? What is that Nibbana? When this was said, the wanderer Magandia rubbed his own limbs with his hands and said, "This is that health, Master Gotama. This is that Nibbana, for I am now healthy and happy, and nothing afflicts me." Uh-oh, he's falling deep into delusion again, it seems so. Okay, Magandia, suppose there were a man born blind who could not see dark and light forms, who could not see blue, yellow, red, pink forms, who could not see what was even and uneven, who could not see the stars and the sun and the moon. He might hear a man with good eyesight saying, "Good indeed, sirs, is a white cloth, beautiful, spotless, and clean." And he would go in search of a white cloth. Then a man would cheat him with a dirty, soiled garment thus: "Good man, here is a white cloth for you, beautiful, spotless, and clean." And he would accept it, put it on, and being satisfied with it, he would utter words of satisfaction thus: "Good indeed, sir, is a white cloth, beautiful, spotless, and clean." What do you think, Magandia? Would that man born blind accept that dirty, soiled cloth, put it on, and being satisfied with it, uttered the words of satisfaction? Did he do so not knowing and seeing, or out of faith in the man with good eyesight? Venerable sir, he would have done so unknowing, unseeing, out of faith in the man with good eyesight. So too, Magandia, the wanderers of other sects are blind and visionless. They do not know health. They do not see Nibbana. Yet they utter this stanza thus: The greatest of all gains is health. Nibbana is the greatest bliss. This stanza was uttered by earlier accomplished ones, fully enlightened ones. Thus, the greatest of all gains is health. Nibbana is the greatest bliss. The Eightfold Path is the best of paths, for it leads to safety, the deathless. Now it has gradually become current among the ordinary people. And although this body, Magandia, is a disease, a tumor, a dart, a calamity, an affliction, referring to this body, you say, this is that health, Master Gautama. This is that Nibbana. You do not have that noble vision, Magandia, by means of which you might know health and see Nibbana. And then Magandia says, I have confidence in Master Gautama thus. Master Gautama is capable of teaching me the Dhamma in such a way that I can come to know health and to see Nibbana. Magandia, suppose there were a man born blind who could not see dark and light forms, and so on, the sun and the moon. Then his friends and companions and kinsmen, relatives would bring a physician to treat him. The physician would make a medicine for him. Yet by means of that medicine, the man's vision would not arise or be purified. What do you think, Magandia? Would that doctor reap weariness and disappointment? Yes, Master Gautama. So too, Magandia, if I were to teach the Dhamma thus, this is that health, this is that Nibbana, you might not know health nor see Nibbana. And that would be wearisome and troublesome for me. I have confidence in Master Gautama thus. Master Gautama is capable of teaching me the Dhamma in such a way that I can come to know health and to see Nibbana. So he's getting a sense of urgency up in Magandia. Magandia, suppose there were a man born blind who could not see dark and light forms or the sun and moon. He might hear a man with good eyesight saying, good indeed, sir, is this white cloth, beautiful, spotless, and clean. And then we go through the same metaphor where he gets tricked by this person and he gets a soiled cloth. And then a physician would make a medicine, emetics and purgatives, ointments and counter ointments and nasal treatments. And by means of that medicine, the man's vision would arise and be purified. Together with the arising of his vision, his desire and liking for that dirty soiled garment would be abandoned. He suddenly sees what he's wearing is not a clean, beautiful cloth. Then he might burn with indignation and enmity towards that man and might think that he ought to be killed thus. Indeed, I have long been tricked and cheated and defrauded by this man with this dirty, soiled garment. When he told me, good man, here is a white cloth for you, beautiful, spotless, and clean. So too, Magandia, if I were to teach you the Dhamma thus, this is that health, this is that Nibbana. You might know health and see Nibbana, together with the rising of your vision, your desire and lust for the five aggregates, affected by clinging, might be abandoned. Then perhaps you might think, indeed, I have long been tricked, cheated, and defrauded by this mind. For when clinging, I have been clinging just to material form, that's the body. I have been clinging just to feeling. I have been clinging just to perception. I have been clinging just to formations or volition or choices. I have been clinging just to consciousness. With my clinging as a condition, being comes to be. That's rebirth. This is Bhante Sujata's translation of it, which I think is a good one. It makes sense. With clinging as a condition, rebirth comes to be. With rebirth as a condition, birth. With birth as a condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. That may sound familiar to a number of you. Then Magandia says, I have confidence in Master Gautama thus. Master Gautama is capable of teaching me the Dhamma in such a way I might rise up from the seat cured of my blindness. Then Magandia, associate with true men. When you associate with true people, men, women, everyone, you will hear the true Dhamma. When you hear the true Dhamma, you will practice in accordance with the true Dhamma. When you practice in accordance with the true Dhamma, you will know and see for yourself thus. These are diseases, tumors, and darts, but here these diseases, tumors, and darts cease without remainder. With the cessation of my clinging comes the cessation of rebirth. With the cessation of rebirth or being, the cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. When this was said, the wanderer Magandia said, Magnificent, magnificent Gautama, magnificent Master Gautama. Master Gautama has made the Dhamma clear in many ways, as though he were turning upright what has been overthrown, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, or holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms. I go to Master Gautama for refuge, and I go to the Dhamma and the Sangha of bhikkhus. I would receive the going forth of the Master Gautama. I would receive the full admission. I think this phrasing would maybe, if I looked at the Pali, would be something that he is requesting it. May I, or could I, or may I. That's probably an optative. Anyway, I would have to look at it. So, Magandia, one who formerly belongs to another sect and desires the going forth in the full admission in this Dhamma discipline, lives on probation for 4 months. Oh, at that time, that's very short, actually. But that's what he was saying. And then the Master Magandia says, if those who formerly belong to another sect and desire the going forth live on probation for 4 months, and at the end of the 4 months, the bhikkhus are satisfied. What he's saying, that he would go for 4 years if necessary. It looks like we're getting very short on time. Then the wanderer Gautama received the going forth under the Blessed One. So the Lord Buddha granted the going forth sooner than even the 4 months because he had confidence in him. And then, that's at the very end of it, it says that he became, and then he, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, here now entered in upon and by the supreme goal of the holy life for the sake of people go forth into homelessness, and he knows birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what has been done, had to be done, has been done. There's no more coming to any state of being. And Venerable Magandia became one of the Arahants. So at some unknown time, applying himself to the teaching and training, he became an Arahant. So I think there are a few questions here. And someone says, I'm asking how one can take practical steps to let sensual pleasures go. Well, one of the things is to see the drawbacks. Well, it's also the attachment, the thirst, the craving. The Buddha also teaches moderation. And like we have that reflection every time we eat, that we use alms food not for fun, not for pleasure, not for beautification. And so I may be eating the food and the food may be pleasant, but what I'm guarding myself against is desire. So, or even like the sites, I'm going to the servery and there's all this wonderful food out. There's so much food. Some days people bring all kinds of stuff. And my bowl is almost full. And then I see like further on down the line, there's more stuff and more good stuff and more good stuff. And I could really fill up my bowl more than I need. So there's an idea about moderation. So I would just, the Buddha says that one of the ways of abandoning the defilements is by using, and then it specifically talks about how we use our alms food, how we use our requisites. So moderation, and then watching or being aware of the arising of craving and the arising of aversion. And so that's what he was talking about, the taming and guarding and restraining. So I still will see the greed or aversion arising, but I have to let that overwhelm or take over my mind. So that's a practical step, is just seeing, and then also see the suffering in desire, wanting things to be a particular way. I was living in a cabin for the winter in California, and it didn't have very good heating system, and I was feeling cold and uncomfortable, and that was unpleasant sense. And I saw myself feeling irritated and wanting to get grumpy, and why isn't the system better than it was, and blah blah blah. And I could see how I was causing suffering for myself by this whole, but you start catching these ways you make yourself suffer. So I could just be desiring like my cup of tea to be just the right temperature, just the right sweetness, the cabin or wherever I'm staying, just the right temperature, the bed, just the right comfort level, whatever, and there's always seeking. And this is where the dukkha is, the suffering is always trying to get things just right, and I know there are people that actually they're without things that they need, like seriously, because of poverty and other kind of situations. And so I'm not talking about just, there is suffering in the world. That's the first arrow of suffering that there is. We do need shelter. We do need food. We do need water. And so, there is this physical. And so we should take care of the physical the best we can in whatever situation we're in. But just seeking, this pleasures, seeking it to gratify the senses. This is where he's talking about the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So just seeing that. He said if those who don't understand that, the people that don't, and so we start looking at that, examining that for ourselves, to see for ourselves. And then we'll start diminishing the amount of suffering when we stop always seeking that, trying to satisfy. It goes, both avoiding which is unpleasant or painful, and seeking that which is pleasant. So I didn't. There's another one. The Venerable Bhikkhuni, Dhamma means natural law. What does Dhamma mean? Dhamma has a lot of nuances of meaning, and it can be true as things as they are. Nature, it could be the nature of things. It's got a lot of different ways that it's translated. I think there's another question. I think. I guess that was it. There's something in another foreign script that I can't read, so sorry I can't read what you're saying. Here it says, how do you think someone who is so attached to sensual pleasures sees it as problematic? Though there is an intellectual understanding, how can one let go completely? Well, you do need to see the danger. You do need to see the suffering. You do need, even as a child, I remember I would because my mother was really good at portion control. I would eat my ice cream. I would have my allotted amount of ice cream, and I would still want more. And if you don't see the suffering in that, but if you can have more, then you eat more, and you keep eating more, and you get to a point where you're not feeling so well. That's suffering. Or, you get away with eating it more, and you don't necessarily feel so bad, but you're gaining weight, and you're getting unhealthy because you're indulging in what's not healthy for you, because you just like it, because you want it. There's some innocent things like enjoying wildlife, seeing wildlife, and that's natural beauty and things like that, and that's innocent enough. But I also found myself, I was I'm wanting to see the birds, right? So there's this craving, even just like the birds. If you want to see them, the birds can sense this desire. It's almost like they get more frightened because, there's a bird, I want to see it, and then it flies away, And so if I'm just really at peace and still, and the birds are like on the grass or something in front of me, I'm sitting on the grass and there's no craving, I'm just, that can just be a pleasant experience. But it's like, what kind of bird is that? I want to know what it is. And the birds will they'll fly away. And then, people spend hours in taking photographs. And I know, that kind of thing is innocent enough. But if you really want to get into deeply into the path, if you want to really abandon craving, you have to really look at the drawbacks. And, like your whole photo collection gets destroyed, or something glitch on the cloud or something happens. Who knows? You would think it's permanent, but it's not. Or I took this picture and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and I share it with other people, and they're like, yeah. But I spent hours in the cold just waiting with my tripod, to get this image. And I think this is great. I should be in National Geographic. And other people are like, yeah. Nowadays, there's millions of those kind of photos. It's just saturated with, and you might not even be able to find it because you've got so many. It's like, anyway. So yeah, the main thing would be to see how long the gratification lasts. See how long, and see what happens after the gratification or the enjoyment fades. And then see the danger in that. See the danger in this continuous craving. See the dukkha. And then also when the mind becomes still and you start cultivating certain states like loving kindness, you get joy from acts of generosity, joy from cultivating loving kindness, compassion. And then the sense pleasures, the other senses, this is the mind's gate, is more subtle. And the other sense pleasures are not they're not truly, they're not, you're not going to want the thrill. The experience isn't so comfortable anymore once your mind gets more still and quiet and peaceful. It's not that you won't enjoy a sunset or something like that. You still will. But you're not going to, it's going to be pleasurable. But it's temporary. It's part of it's nature. It's beautiful, and then it fades. The sunset fades, and that's part of the beauty of it. You can't grasp it. So it's a little after 9. And I don't know if anyone here has a question. I know this is a powerful sutta, and I keep going back to it again and again. And it's not, this Magandia was remarkable in that he could just say, okay, I'm doing it. I'm going for it. I'm going forth. And not everybody has to do that. It's this thing with the gradual path, and people take it at different rates. And somehow Magandia was just ready for it. So, yeah, practically, just at our own pace, just in our own natural unfolding. Okay, so I will close for now. May you all be well, happy, and peaceful.